The handouts coming off the press, Perlin will bring those in when they're done there. Everybody doing okay? Are we rolling yet? Okay. Thank you for joining us tonight as we continue our study on 1 Kings, Kingdom Come. Go ahead and open your Bibles to 1 Kings chapter 15. We're going to be in two chapters tonight, 1 Kings 15 and 16. Like I said, those papers will come here in just a second. This is session 8, so you're going to have page 20 and 21 as your next. Any questions so far as we've studied the 1 Kings? Any comments or?
It's really helped me to understand the divided kingdom because I was always so confused.
Okay.
Maybe still a little confused, but it's helped.
Yes. Thank you. As she's passing those out, let me explain what can be confusing about the Kings when you're studying the book of Kings. You are simultaneously tracking two kingdoms because of the divided kingdom. And so I always felt it was confusing and always find it a challenge teaching this class because you may have an introduction to a segment or a chapter that is about the king of Judah, but it starts by saying in the whatever year of the king of Israel. And that's giving you a baseline of how it's like a differential chronology so you can kind of see, okay, where was it in the northern king's time frame did this southern king do what he did? And then on top of that, not only are you tracking two nations, you're tracking one nation, but it's in a divided kingdom state. So you're tracking two kingdoms, two reigns, and then it will switch. And then on top of that, the names. Jehoshaphat, or some of the other names that have more than 3 syllables, you know. It can be confusing, right? And then on top of that, as you're talking about one of those kings, let's say Israel, for example, it may say something about that king of Israel, this, and this, and then that he died or that he did something or this happened in the whatever year of the king of Judah's time frame. And then it goes on continuing about the king of Israel. And then when you switch over to the king of Judah, when it goes back to another one of those kings, it'll repeat what you already learned about the king of Judah. But now, since you're on the king of Judah, it's as if it's its own segment now, so it will repeat it. And we see this a little bit in chapters 15 and 16. Everybody got a handout now? I've entitled this lesson, Like Father, Like Son. How many of you, men, feel like you're like your father? And hopefully that's a good thing, okay? How many of you women are like your mother? Okay. And how many of you, either whether you were a man or woman and you're thinking of your father or your mother, how many of you when you were younger said, I will not be like my father or mother? How many of you said that? And so the age-old excuse that I grew up with when I would ask Dad, why couldn't I go do this, was because I said so. And I vowed that when I grew up and became a dad, I would never give that excuse. Guess who's eating their words? You understand where I'm coming from? That's the best answer to give. Because I said so. And it's biblical. Peter in the boat with Jesus, on that one occasion where there's a miraculous catch of fish, because he's asked the disciples to go out, launch in the deep, and Peter said, we have fished all night, we've not caught anything, and you know what it's like to be around frustrated fishermen, right? And you get out, but because you say so, Peter said, but because you say so, it was almost as if just to get you off our chest, or to we got to prove it to you. There's nothing out there. And of course, they were obviously astonishingly surprised at the miraculous catch of fish. But because you say so. Like father, like son. The nut doesn't fall far from the tree. I put that as a quote here from the just as an introduction line. So let's look at the two chapter summaries. The first chapter we're looking at is chapter 15. Let's summarize it, and like we usually do, there will be a few times we'll pause and we'll read that which is bolded and underlined. We're going to read from the text itself. But Rehoboam has died. Okay, so Jeroboam's still going on, okay, but Rehoboam has died, and his son, some people say Abijah, or I say Abijah, so I'm going to go with Abijah, has started reigning as king of Judah. This is in Jeroboam's 18th year as the king of Israel. Abijah's reign will last 3 years. Here's an assessment of his 3 years in the monarchy. Verse 3. He committed all the sins who his father had done before him. His heart was not fully devoted to the Lord his God, as the heart of David, his forefather, had been. Nevertheless, for David's sake, the Lord his God gave him a lamp in Jerusalem by raising up a son to succeed him and by making Jerusalem strong. Okay, I read more than one verse there, but that's his assessment. He was just like his father and not like his forefather. Okay? This phrase, for David's sake, seems to keep recurring. Did you notice that? We've already seen it once. Well, we've seen it probably more than once, but we've had one lesson where we've seen it, where it's mentioned maybe a few times. This for David's sake is to preserve the house of David in a respective way that's ultimately going to work out to be part of God's plan, because it's going to be from the root of Jesse, David, that the Messiah line is going to come from the tribe of Judah. And so there's an ultimate goal in that. But it says for David's sake, God would raise up Abijah's son, Asa, to reign as king. This is with the following explanation, verse 5. For David had done what was right in the eyes of the Lord, and had not failed to keep any of the Lord's commands all the days of his life. And I found this kind of interesting, except in the case of Uriah the Hittite, of whom, of course, Bathsheba's husband, who had been sent to the front line and was killed in battle. This is David's sin with Bathsheba being pointed out.